It is not just the RMS Titanic. It is a question that has never been answered. How could a floating fortress of steel worth $7.5 million, advertised as the conquest of nature, collapse into the freezing abyss in just 160 minutes? Why did a system designed to defy the violence of the North Atlantic surrender to a simple cold equation? And more importantly, why did 1,500 souls become the first victims of the very confidence they trusted? But that is only the surface. Behind the moment the stern rose silently towards the stars lies another story less told, but equally dangerous, about locked iron gates, mathematical arrogance, and a chain of small errors merging into history. Why did it all happen in 1912? And what actually killed the Queen of the Ocean ice hubris, or the calculator? Stay tuned, because the truth about the Titanic is unlike any story you know. April 10th, 1912. The day did not smell like tragedy. It smelled of fresh paint coal dust and the electric ozone of the new century. To understand the horror of the end, you must first understand the seduction of the beginning. The Titanic was not merely a transportation vessel. She was a declaration of war against nature. In an era where the ocean was still a terrifying, untamed frontier, this ship was civilization's ultimate fortress. She was 882 feet of man-made arrogance designed to make the Atlantic Ocean feel small. Passengers stepping onto the gangway didn't feel fear. They felt chosen. For the wealthy in first class, the ship was an extension of the Ritz. The staterooms were not cabins. They were apartments paneled in mahogany and silk. The air inside didn't taste like sea salt. It tasted of expensive cigars, champagne, and the warm, reassuring hum of the dynamos. The electric lights, thousands of them, banished the night so effectively that time itself seemed to stop. It was a world of absolute order, where the soup was always hot, the music was always playing, and the ground beneath their feet felt as solid as the streets of London. The crystal glasses on the dinner tables chimed in perfect unison, masking the deep rhythmic groaning of the steel floor beneath their dancing shoes. But the ship was built on more than just steel. It was built on a rigid Victorian philosophy. The architecture of the Titanic was a physical map of the class system. At the top, the air was light and the views were endless. Deep below, in the belly of the beast, the third-class passengers were packed into utilitarian bunks. They were not mistreated, in fact. For many, the Titanic offered better conditions than their homes in Ireland or Italy. But they were contained. This containment was physical. Heavy iron gates separated the classes. In the logic of 1912, these gates were a sanitary measure designed to prevent the spread of infectious diseases from the poor to the rich. They were standard procedure. No one looked at those locked barriers and saw a death trap. They saw only the reassuring lines of social order. As the ship cut through the water at 21 knots, the passengers were lulled into a hypnotic state of security. The ocean outside was freezing, a predator, waiting in the dark, but inside the temperature was controlled, the libraries were stocked, and the beds were soft. The Captain Edward Smith was the patriarch of this floating city, a man whose presence alone suggested that God himself was steering the ship. This illusion of safety was so complete that the ship's designers had made a fatal aesthetic choice.
Marvelous, isn't it? I still can't believe the grandeur of it all.
Indeed. To our
The boat deck was designed to be a promenade, a place for leisure and morning strolls. It was wide open and uncluttered. To keep this view pristine, they had reduced the number of lifeboats. The deck was beautiful and open because the ugly mathematics of survival had been hidden away to preserve the view. They had enough boats for roughly half the people on board. This wasn't an oversight. It was a calculation. The regulators believed that a ship this advanced would never sink. At worst, it would stay afloat long enough for a rescue. The lifeboats were not seen as escape vehicles. They were viewed as ferries to transfer people to a rescue ship. The math was cold, but in the warm glow of the dining saloon, nobody was checking the numbers. They were too busy admiring the ceiling. For 4 days, the dream held. The sea remained calm, almost like a sheet of glass. The engines pushed the ship faster, chasing a record, chasing glory. The massive reciprocating engines the size of houses beat like a healthy heart. Down in the boiler rooms, men shoveled coal into furnaces that burned hotter than cremation fires, powering the lights that kept the darkness at bay. Everything was perfect. The system worked. The hierarchy held. The machine was winning. 11:40 p.m. The illusion breaks. It does not begin with a roar. It begins with a vibration, a shudder that runs through the spine of the ship like a nervous twitch in a sleeping giant. In the first-class dining saloon, silver forks rattle against china for 3 seconds. Then silence returns. The poker players in the smoking room laugh it off. They barely spilled their whiskey. But down in the forward holds, the reality is deafening. As a steward on D-deck straightens a painting that shook loose, the Atlantic Ocean is already jetting into the Boiler Room 6 with the pressure of a fire hose. The iceberg has not smashed the ship. It has surgically opened it, a 300-foot gash, a fatal wound hidden entirely underwater. The Predator Ocean is no longer outside. It is inside. Thomas Andrews, the ship's architect, stands in the bridge with the captain. He holds the schematics in his hands. His face is pale. He is doing the math.
I'm afraid so, Mr. Andrews. The forward compartments are compromised.
The ship is designed to float with 4 watertight compartments flooded. The ice has breached 5. The equation is simple. The result is absolute. There is no debate, no negotiation with physics. The ship is a dead thing. It just hasn't fallen over yet. Andrews looks at the captain and delivers the sentence, an hour, maybe 2. Now, the betrayal begins. The order goes out, women and children first. But the order does not travel at the speed of sound. It travels at the speed of class. On the boat deck, officers are politely waking up millionaires, helping them into life jackets, as if dressing them for a winter walk. The band begins to play. They play upbeat ragtime music. It is a psychological sedative. The bright electric lights remain on, casting a warm golden glow against the pitch-black sky. It looks safe. It feels safe. This is the cruelty of the horror of waiting. The deck is level. The music is cheerful. But the math is ticking. Deep below the scene is a war zone. The sanitary iron gates, those procedure barriers, are now locked cages. Third-class passengers' families, clutching everything they own in burlap sacks, press against the steel grills. They scream for the stewards to open them. The stewards, trained to follow orders, hesitate. They have no instructions. They wait. And while they wait, the water rises past their ankles, then their knees. Freezing, oily black water. While a first-class passenger complains that the lifeboat is too cold, a third-class father is using his shoulder to batter a locked steel gate as the water touches the ceiling behind him. 12:45 a.m. The first lifeboat is lowered. It has a capacity of 65. It leaves with 28. The mathematics of death is compounded by the mathematics of incompetence. The crew, afraid the davits will buckle, launch them half empty. They are throwing away seats in the only vehicles that matter. The angle of the deck begins to shift. It is subtle at first, then undeniable. Gravity, once a constant, becomes a variable. Walking requires effort. The horizon is wrong. The false hope spikes. The pumps are working furiously. The lights blaze with defiant intensity. For a moment, a rumor spreads. A rescue ship is on the horizon. The Californian. See the lights. People stop panic buying seats in the boats. They wait. They smile. They trust the system. Then the ocean crushes the hope. The bow dips violently. A wave washes over the forward deck, not with a crash, but with a smooth, heavy inevitability. The water climbs the stairs. It is hunting. 1:50 a.m. The panic is no longer silent. The civilized mask of the Edwardian era falls off. The stern is rising into the air, lifting the massive propellers out of the water. They hang there black, cyclopean crosses against the stars, dripping water onto the screaming crowds below. The sounds change. The playful ragtime music has stopped. Now the soundtrack is the terrifying groan of metal under torture. The ship is bending. The keel is being asked to support weight it was never designed to hold. Rivets, thousands of them, pop like gunfire pinging into the dark. As the priest on the aft deck finishes the Lord's Prayer, the main expansion joint fails with a sound like a thunderclap, snapping the ship's spine in two. The lights flicker once, twice, and then the true horror, total darkness. The stern crashes back down, crushing the swimmers. For a second it bobs there, looking like it might survive. But the math is relentless. The bow, already filled with thousands of tons of water, drags the broken half down. The final plunge is vertical. The stern rises 90 degrees. Passengers cling to the railings, dangling over the abyss. Then the slide begins. The elevator to the bottom of the world, the roar of escaping air, the implosion of bulkheads, and then 2:20 a.m., silence. Not a quiet silence. A deafening, vast silence. The ship is gone. The lights are gone. All that remains is a flat, black mirror of water and the cries of 1,500 people thrashing in water that is 28 degrees Fahrenheit. The cold does not kill them instantly. It is slower. It is a thief. It steals the feeling in their hands, then their legs, then their voices. The screaming fades into a collective moaning, and then one by one into nothingness. The predator ocean has fed. The equation is balanced. The surface became quiet at 3:00 a.m. The Carpathia arrived, collected the survivors, and sailed away, leaving the Atlantic exactly as it had been for 1,000,000 years, gray cold and indifferent. But 2.5 miles down, the violence had not ended. It had just changed forms. While the world mourned the headlines, the ship itself was undergoing a brutal transformation. The bow, filled with water and aerodynamically shaped, glided toward the bottom like a dart. It cut through the dark water at 30 miles per hour. When it impacted the ocean floor, it didn't land softy. It drove itself 60 feet deep into the prehistoric sediment, bearing the anchors, bearing the name, bearing the pride. The force of the impact buckled the steel plating, folding the metal skin like wet cardboard. The stern, however, had a worse fate. Filled with air pockets, it imploded on the way down. The pressure of the deep ocean, 6,000 pounds per square inch, smashed the steel compartments as if they were made of glass. It didn't land as a ship. It rained down as a debris field of twisted iron, scattered luggage, and shattered machinery. Then the darkness took over. For 73 years, the Titanic ceased to be a ship. It became a legend, a ghost story, a rumor. It wasn't until 1985 that the resurrection began. It did not come from prayers, but from cold, hard engineering. Dr. Robert Ballard and his team aboard the research vessel Nor were not just looking for a wreck. They were testing military-grade imaging technology designed to find nuclear submarines. They dragged a sled named Argo just above the seafloor, a robot eye staring into the eternal night. For days, they saw nothing but mud. Miles and miles of gray, featureless monotony. It was a desert of eternal winter. Then, the camera caught a boiler. It was massive, round, and unmistakable. The face of the rivets was still clear. The team on the surface cheered, but the celebration died quickly as the camera moved forward. The resolution of the image brought a new forensic horror to the screen. The Titanic they found was not the romantic ruin artists had painted. It was a crime scene. The grand staircase was gone, dissolved by the ocean, or ejected during the breakup. The woodwork was eaten away. But the most chilling discovery was the biology of the deep. The ship was being consumed. A new species of bacteria, Halomonas titanici, was feasting on the iron. The wreck was covered in rusticles, orange icicle-like formations that looked like weeping sores. The ship was bleeding rust into the water. The engineering that was meant to last forever was being digested by microscopic life forms. But the camera lenses zoomed in further past the massive propellers and the broken hull, shifting from the macro scale of the disaster to the micro scale of the tragedy. They found the debris field a 2-mile stretch of scattered belongings. There were unopened champagne bottles, their corks compressed by the pressure, but still sealing the vintage wine inside. There were porcelain doll heads, their painted eyes staring blankly at the silt. There were intricate brass clocks, their hands frozen. The clock on the mantelpiece of the Strauss suite still read the time of the sinking ticking for an audience of ghosts until the water stopped the gears. And then the lights of the submersible fell upon the most haunting image of the entire expedition. The ultimate micro zoom. Lying in the mud, arranged in perfect pairs, were shoes. Rough workman's boots. Delicate satin dancing slippers. Small leather shoes of a child. They were not scattered randomly. They were laying side by side, spaced exactly as they would be if someone were wearing them. This is the forensic brutality of the deep ocean. At this depth, the chemistry of the water dissolves human bone. The calcium carbonate of the skeletons is eaten away by the undersaturated water. The flesh is consumed by scavengers. The bodies of the 1,500 victims have vanished completely. But the leather. The leather was treated with tanning chemicals. It is toxic to the bacteria. It resists the ocean. So the bodies are gone, but the shoes remain. They act as tombstones. Each pair marks the exact spot where a human being hit the bottom of the world. They mark where a mother held a child or where a husband held his wife. The person has been erased by the chemistry of the abyss, but their final footprint is locked in the mud forever. The camera glides over a pair of heavy stoker's boots laced tight, then a few feet away, a pair of expensive patent leather shoes. Down here, the iron gates of class are gone. The millionaire and the coal shoveler lie in the same mud, reduced to the same remaining artifact. The salvage operations that followed in the coming decades brought up pieces of the hull whistles and jewelry. They raised the big piece, a 20-ton section of the hull, resurrecting it into the air for the first time in a century. But they could not raise the life, the engineering of the recovery mission. The robotic arms, the titanium hulls of the mere submersibles, the high-intensity floodlights could only illuminate the graveyard. They proved that the ship broke in half. They proved the expansion joints failed. They proved the steel was brittle in the cold. The investigation was a triumph of science. The autopsy was complete. But as the submersibles ascend, leaving the wreck behind to the darkness once again, the lasting image is not the broken prow of the ship. It is those empty shoes pointing upward, waiting for a rescue that came 70 years too late. The Titanic will not last forever. Scientists predict that within 20 to 30 years, the bacteria will finish their meal. The iron structure will collapse into a rust stain on the ocean floor, merging with the sediment until nothing remains but the porcelain and the glass. But the lesson remains harder than the steel ever was. The Titanic was not just a tragedy of the past. It is a warning for the future. It is a monument to the dangerous moment when we believe our own marketing. We built a ship that we said could not sink, and because we believed it, we removed the safety nets. We trusted the math of profit over the math of survival. Today, we build skyscrapers that scrape the stratosphere AI systems that think faster than we do, and spacecraft that aim for Mars. We tell ourselves we have mastered the variables. We tell ourselves we are safe. But the ocean is still there. It is indifferent to our technology. It is indifferent to our wealth. It is patient. The mathematics of 1912 are still true today. If you subtract the margin for error to chase efficiency, the result is always catastrophe. The ice is always waiting in the dark. And somewhere in the deep silence of the Atlantic, the pressure is still crushing the last remnants of the Gilded Age, proving once and for all that while man can build the machine, nature always owns the patent. History is not just dates and numbers. It is the collective memory of our species. Thank you for taking the time to remember these events with us. If you have a story or an event you believe deserves to be told, leave it in the comments. We are listening.